Together we'll see who dies and survives, circled around a sacred fire, strumming along with our favorite lyre. Adventure called the quest awaits, your destiny's in the hands of the fates. But never fear, we're all friends here, we'll have your back when danger's near. Come with us through the pages as we unravel a tale for the ages into the Percy-Verse.
Hello and welcome to the Percy-Verse podcast. I'm Alisa.
And I'm Anna. Try to resist the smell of powdered donuts in the air, because today we're reading Chapter 10, We Hitch a Ride with Dead Confederates. In this chapter, the team escapes from the Princess Andromeda using Hermes' gift of the wind. Annabeth shows Percy and Tyson an old hideout she made with Luke and Talia from their days on the run. We learn the secret of monster donuts, and we finally rejoin the main storyline as Clarice once again saves the day. We're back.
We are back. And we start in the theme of this book, really, the chapters being continuous and they're not really being big time jumps. This is another one where we literally pick up the moment that we left off.
Absolutely.
Like not a second
and also,
has passed.
We get the end of the chapter action in the title.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the hitching of the ride really isn't even quite barely happening yet when we get to the end of this chapter. It's almost like the next chapter.
I know, it really is. Which I do just want to say, because this chapter title does say what we will be discussing next chapter. Yes. The Confederates soldiers are not in this chapter, but trust, we will be discussing that when we reach discuss in the next chapter. Just putting it out there. It will happen. But because it's in this chapter title, which is odd because it's like that doesn't actually occur. They don't hitch the ride.
It's like the last paragraph that you even learn that there's a steamboat and what the name is.
Yes.
We haven't even boarded yet. So versus like when they go to the Princess Andromeda in that chapter title, they do get on the ship in the chapter. Yes. So it's just kind of interesting. And there are so many chapters of like, then we boarded this boat. So it's kind of funny. This has that chapter title, but that's not what actually happens in the chapter.
No, it doesn't. But we pick up with Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson falling basically with this life raft.
Yeah. Off the, we've discussed how big
a cruise ship is.
Cruise ship is. We're falling really far.
Incredibly
in a tiny boat, lifeboat. Yes. So that is really scary, especially if you're someone like Annabeth who does not have sea powers.
Yeah. And luckily, Tyson and Percy are really in sync in this. Annabeth, very understandably, is kind of losing her mind a bit in this moment.
I really like the description, having long hair myself currently, that her hair, they're falling so fast that her hair is flying straight up like a torch. Yes. I'm like, we're falling so fast.
Yes. But Percy and Tyson, they are locked in. Tyson knows that Percy is going to use the thermos in this moment so that they can get away as quickly as possible and faster than anyone on the Princess Andromeda can really do anything about. And Tyson, once again, coming in clutch, incredibly helpful.
Absolutely.
Basically holds on to all of them while Percy does this maneuver. And I don't know, I feel like if Tyson had been there, Percy and Annabeth might have flown every which direction except for the boat.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think that, we could have ended up in a really different situation if Tyson hadn't been there. I starred these two moments because Percy says Tyson's going to get them killed, or he worries that, and we kind of noted that. I starred when Tyson understands what Percy needs and takes out the magical thermos for him to turn. And it's worth us starting to track, I think, how many times he's turned it and how much he's turned it, so we can start that in this chapter, because I think that's interesting. And then again, when Tyson grabs both of them by their shirts right before he turns the thermos, just kind of noting these moments where he's definitely doing a life-saving thing. Because there's a world where we get to Calypso sooner because
Right.
they just get like so far flung.
Yeah.
Or there's a world where they get like recaptured because nobody
Right.
grabbed the thermos in time.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of ways in which Tyson is really, really key to them escaping in this moment.
Yes, absolutely. And they do successfully and I do just love this description that when Percy just slightly uncaps the thermos, that the wind seemed to laugh as if it shot out from the thermos, like it was glad to be free. And I just really like that description of like the wind laughing on its way out, being like,
I do too. Well, and I like, to me, I think reading Heroes of Olympus gives this whole wind thermos thing just like so many more layers, because we meet so many different wind gods and children of wind gods and wind spirits in those books. And so I feel like I have a so much more of a like embodied or personified sense of who is in this thermos, and I'm wondering like how long they've been there, almost like a genie lamp or something, like how long have they been trapped in this thermos, or did Hermes just do it before he gives it to Percy? And at this point Percy has turned a quarter turn of the thermos cap.
Thank you. And they have this kind of funny moment where they like skip a couple times over the ocean, because there's like,
it's like
so
they're in a
much
motorboat
speed.
at that point.
And then they start kind of speeding as if they're in a full speed boat, which I guess I also want to say shout out to the quality of this lifeboat, that it is able to withstand that much speed, because it is not built for that. It is not built to withstand all of that friction and just
maybe a cruise ship that was built to hold monsters has stronger lifeboats. That's the only thing I can think. Maybe they invested a little bit more in the quality of the lifeboats for the different creatures that could be on them.
But they very quickly get away, hearing like a wail of outrage in the background. But the ship has now, it's faded to tiny white boat, and then it's completely gone. So they have very quickly made their escape.
I felt so much relief. I don't know how you felt, but when I read that like description and imagining it, I was like, oh my god.
And then while they're racing over the sea, Annabeth and Percy decide to try and contact Chiron, because they just got this info dump from Luke. And they're like, okay, well, the sea's spraying while we're going, so maybe we can use this connection. And they make the call, but it is like the connection is really poor, because Chiron is in a place that's very, very loud, and they're not like, they can't really hear Chiron. It's not totally clear how much Chiron is hearing of what they're trying to tell him.
And they're reaching out to Chiron partly because they don't know who to trust at camp. And one thing that I was wondering is if this made you think of the car wash scene in The Lightning Thief, because it really brought that up for me. And while in that case they're trying to reach Chiron, but they reach Luke and they get like misdirected, and he like sows tension in the group. But I think it's also here, it's like they reach Chiron but they can't quite reach him or hear him, so there's always like something that's kind of getting in the way. I think it's smart to use the mist to reach out to them. But the big thing here is we get introduced to the vibes of the party ponies, but we don't really get an explanation for who they are. So it's just like Chiron is clubbing somewhere, maybe in the woods, and we don't know why or how, what is happening, throughout this scene. They do tell him about some of what Luke has said. And Chiron says, Percy, you have to watch out for, but then we don't get the end. It's a very frustrating, it's one of those like nothing ever quite gets said conversations that's very frustrating to read. And then I think we need to address here how the party ponies are being described, as we do whenever anything comes up that, is like insensitive or racist or things that we, discuss on the pod. And so the description here is that there's like shouting and whooping behind him, and they're specifically referenced as sounding like Comanche warriors. And I think we just want to say that like when you're an author and you are making an analog or a description of what something looks or sounds or feels, like any sensation, don't use a cultural reference point that is not part of your own background and experience. Mm-hmm. First of all, I think that it's just offensive to do that in general. And then second of all, whether it feels accurate or not, it's just not your place to speak to that experience for any of us, to speak to that experience. And I think that you always will run the risk of stereotyping or bringing up really problematic reference points to whatever you're referencing. And so I think that in this case, I would just say, like, pick a different analogy. We don't need this analogy. And yeah, it actually, for some reason in this particular chapter, we're referencing Native Americans twice. Yeah. It happens again later when we're describing the hideout that Annabeth and Luke and Talia made. And that one, it's kind of nondescript, like Native American hut kind of reference. And again, I just think that let's keep our cultural reference points to cultures that we're a part of and that we have belonging with, so that we are being sensitive and not stereotyping and, not being problematic in our writing, because it's kind of not necessary.
Yeah. I completely agree. And the only thing that I'll add is, for all of us writers, there are so many words and ways to describe things, so many analogies to use, metaphors to use, similes to use. Like, there is an abundance, a plethora of options. And so, like, just, all of us kind of take that as, like, a reminder and a learning of, like, reference your own experiences, the things that like you said, the cultural references, the cultural touchstones that should you like to use that as an analogy, a metaphor, what have you.
And I will say, there are people that, like, are specifically consultants to help you if you this isn't to say, like, don't write diverse characters. I think Rick Riordan is actually an example of someone who, like, goes on to grow in this area, and instead of having them as just, like, random analogies, he actually has, like, fully fledged characters with different cultural backgrounds, and also has collaborated with people with lived experience to write characters multiple times, which I think is a really great way to go. But I've seen many people who are consultants on writing, like, for example, how do you describe the skin tone of a person of color? Like, don't use a food, but, like, there's also different ideas of, like, what is a good way to describe skin tone.
Totally.
And so in addition, it's not just, because I think, like, we've talked about this before, it's not just like, don't do this. It's like, don't do this, but what do you do instead?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And so I think collaboration and sensitivity reading are definitely things you can do, but there's also people that are here to, like, help you to write in a way that just, like, honors everybody's lived experiences, even if it's not something that you come from, and you can work with consultants like that to do that. So there are options, and it doesn't mean, like, don't write the thing or, like, only write from your own cultural perspective, but these are just examples of what ends up feeling kind of like flippant uses, I think, of and unnecessary uses of bringing in other cultures in ways that doesn't, like, expand the story, but runs the risk of re-stereotyping and, like, bringing in racism into your story. That's, like, not necessary.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I even extend that to, like, like, beyond that, like, do you want to write, like, a disabled character? Like, there are disabled consultants out there where you can be like, okay, how can I do this with respect and with actually, like honoring the true real experience of someone, so this applies to, like, all of the many ways in which diversity exists in our world. Like, include that in your writing, and just know, like, I feel like it always comes back to, it's really important to know what you don't know. And to be able to say, I don't know this. I feel inspired to include a character with this particular, like, background or experience or whatever that I don't have. So let me go talk with someone who does, and, like, work with people who do, so that I can ensure that I am accounting for what I don't know. Because we all got a whole lot of things that we don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's just so important to be able to recognize that and to have the humility to say that and be like, I don't know these things. Let me learn. Let me listen. Let me research. Let me like.
And again, it makes your story better.
It does.
More interesting and accessible to more people. So
yes. Yeah.
Yes.
This is a really quick tangent, but something that I had been reflecting on, and I couldn't remember if we had discussed really, really early on in the first season or not, but I was just really reflecting on the fact that in this book, and this is something that is not exclusive to these books, I think it's something that can be found in many, many books, but the default being to only describe like the skin colors of characters of color and not of white characters, therefore making the default the assumption of, if I'm reading, like, we never hear that Percy is white. We never hear that Annabeth is white. We never hear, like, it is never, we never hear, like, we never get Clarissa's, the description of, like, the color of her skin, what she looks like. It is just assumed that because it's not described that it is white. And so I couldn't remember if we had like made a note of that.
I don't know if we had, but I think that is really important. Like when one of the ways that you can know, how this is coming up in your own writing is to look for the defaults, to look for the places where you're not describing people. Because even within white skin tone, like there's many different undertones and shades. And, and I think, that's just a really good frame of reference or specific piece that you can look at to see in your own writing how this might be coming up, and among the other pieces we already mentioned.
So diving back into like the story that we're following here, there's a little bit more back and forth. We do get Chiron referencing Curse My Relatives, so I think that's our hint, that's our kind of like, because he did say I think he was gonna go meet up with his relatives, so this is like our confirmation. His brethren,
he might have said, but we're getting
these are his relatives. We still don't know that they're the party ponies, and Chiron tries to communicate more, kind of telling Annabeth she shouldn't have let Percy leave, and something about if they do get to the Golden Fleece, but everything gets cut off. Chiron is able to throw in Miami. They hear Miami. I'll try to keep watch, and that's kind of it. And they lose connection completely.
I think that one little note to kind of like follow a through line we've been talking about with Annabeth and in general with some of these children who are being given responsibilities greater than they should be. Here it's like, not only does Chiron make Annabeth swear on the river Styx to protect Percy. Percy, who Chiron knows at this point, like knows that he would do something like go on a quest even if it was unsanctioned. I think that Chiron's instinct here to blame Annabeth, like to say you shouldn't have let him leave, just sort of like continues this through line of adultification of children, and like, yes, demigods are expected to be heroes and trained for that and like prepared for those kinds of roles, but I don't think that's the same thing as giving a kid a responsibility that large for another kid her same age.
I completely agree, and I do want to add my own personal layer of analysis to that, which is that speaking purely along the lines of the gender binary, that happens so much more with girls than it does with boys. And it is not lost on me that the person who was like given the responsibility of another like child's life, exactly, yes, and that like to me it feels like it's like, oh, Percy's allowed to be impulsive, Annabeth, you need to curb that, and it's like they both got ADHD.
Yeah, it's like these two kids, same age,
massively
with
impulsive
ADHD
children. Like, but I do think there is this expectation, and to a certain extent, I think a bit, and I know that like all neurodivergence is a spectrum, and not every kid with ADHD is going through the same things. Not every girl with ADHD is going to have the same like symptoms and things that are harder for them or easier for them, like those types of things. But like, I do also think that there is, and it's making me now curious to kind of track this, like in the portrayal of because especially in these books, we really only have children who exist on the binary of like gender. How is like the ADHD of the girls written versus how's the ADHD of the boys written? And do the boys kind of get to be more impulsive to a certain degree than maybe the girls do? And I am not an ADHD expert, so I don't know, but I'm just noticing, and it feels...
Well, no, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that, because like ADHD is underdiagnosed in girls and women, and there's like a lot of people, including myself, who like end up exploring this later in life because the way that people raised as girls are conditioned is that things like impulsivity and especially like physical impulsivity are very, very punished and controlled oftentimes with people raised as girls. And I think that it just, I think, masks so many of those symptoms, and the expectations are so different. And I think even with Annabeth and Percy as examples, like from what we've been told, Annabeth has as much ADHD symptomology as Percy does.
Yeah.
But when you think of her, you think of like the architect who's organized and studies the books and, you know, like is super smart. And I think that her attributes show up really, really differently. And she's oftentimes looked at to be like the voice of reason, counter to Percy's impulsivity. And I do think that that's like perpetuating some of what you're talking about. And part, not so much I'm saying like the book is doing a really bad job of portraying ADHD, because I think in general, like, it's nice to have representation here, and I do think that it's portraying like the reality of how this can show up in a gendered way because of socialization. But as we're like outside of the book analyzing it inward, I do think it's an important piece to just like name for anyone experiencing this, especially if you're like experiencing a late diagnosis or wondering if this might be part of your experience, that there is so much that comes in with layering. It's true with autism too. Like I have several friends that were diagnosed as adults who are women because it's just like so masked through socialization that it's not something that gets caught or like understood or there's room for earlier in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That just made me think that I think it could be really interesting to like talk to like experts in ADHD and in like neurodivergence, like as it relates to this world and like kind of then like our understanding of these characters. I feel like that would be really cool to like delve into things from that side of it and like get even more from that perspective.
Let's do it.
And so this is when we kind of have like our first time jump after a while, like the connection
of
Chiron.
One whole hour.
A whole hour has passed on the sea.
Has.
And
so they are moving pretty fast. So it does tell us like the winds have been pretty lasted for a while, are pretty strong. And like you said, this lifeboat is holding up. So that's really interesting.
Yes. And Annabeth recognizes that they're in Virginia Beach, and she's realizing that not only are they traveling really fast, but the Princess Andromeda traveled incredibly fast overnight in order for them to be able to be at Virginia Beach right now. And this is where we get new skill unlocked.
We do! Ding!
Where Percy is able to tell how many nautical miles they traveled overnight and their exact current positioning on the sea.
Yes, he knows their coordinates precisely. And Annabeth is like, it must be because of your dad, because of Poseidon. When you're at sea, you have perfect bearings. And then this is where her kind of like nerdiness and Percy's like tiredness comes in. And she's like, that is so cool. She's like, that's a new skill unlocked. Like she's saying it that way, like you just said. And Percy's like, I don't know. I didn't want to be a human GPS. But what's also funny, I just wanted to note that actually made me laugh more about this moment is because sometimes we talk about like when these books were written and how there's things that like don't apply now.
Yes.
The wording is actually, I didn't want to be a human GPS unit.
I know.
Because at the time, GPS was like, if you remember, depending on who's listening, because some people like might not have been able to remember this, but it was like, and there are still units you can carry. Like you can, when you go hiking, if you do like backcountry hiking, like you can have a GPS unit with you, and that's like a good safety thing. But like, it was a thing you had to have installed in your car, or you would like have its own like mobile unit, and it was not like everyone had phones that had Google Maps and like GPS in them already.
Also, the thing that I thought reading that of Annabeth kind of being like, oh, like her realizing like, oh yeah, you're able to do this because of your dad. It just made me realize like how because of the pact and they're not being children of the big three, excluding obviously the ones that like we meet, they're basically like the campers would then not know the full like power set.
That's really interesting.
Of those kids in the way that like Athena kids know this is kind of the range of what Athena kids can do. This is the range of Aphrodite kids. This is the range of Hephaestus' kids. Like that would get lost in the campers. Like Chiron, you know, might probably know, but there wouldn't be a reason for any of the campers to know what a child of the big three is capable of because they haven't been around one in decades.
That is kind of fun. Annabeth has like a running note, where she's like keeping all of like Percy's skills. That made me two tiny reference points, or like quickly, that made me think of two reference points, like in other cultural things. One is the idea in How to Train Your Dragon that like there's the kid who knows the guide on like every single dragon.
Yes.
But with the Night Fury, like they've never actually captured one, so they don't. It's like a blank page. They don't know anything about it. So Percy's like the Night Fury. And then the other one is in Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's like, you know, all the skills usually of the different benders, but it made me think of Toph, who invents metal bending, and how like sometimes you can know things and then someone can like push the limits and find a new skill. So anyway, my brain's like, making all these connections.
That is like Leo being one of the first Hephaestus kids and forever being immune to fire. Piper, like it being rare among Aphrodite kids to have charm speak, and am I mixing it up with the other book of what charm speak is that what they call it? I thought I was mixing it up with Goose Girl for a second.
With Goose Girl, I think that's actually like people speak or something versus
it's people speaking
or wind.
Thank you.
Animal speech.
But we do have examples of kind of like rare and lost abilities like being found again.
I even think that Frank Zhang is an example of that in terms of like his intersection of ancestry and the different skills that he has because of that too. So we have all these like diamond in the roughs in that we're going to meet later, because Percy's obviously that too. But the other question I have is, can Jason or Talia somehow also know some kind of coordinates when they're in the air?
Oh, that's such a great question. And then that also, because Nico knows where they are underground, right? I believe I'm remembering that correctly. That Nico is able to know where they are underground, so it would.
Well, and Hazel does a lot with underground.
Yeah, so it would, but I feel like I remember Nico being able to be like, oh yes, we're under
someplace. Like, he has his bearings.
So it would make sense for.
It's interesting because they do fly in the ship, so I just can't remember if like Jason needs to know or somehow knows where they are. I just can't remember, but it's just interesting, these like geographic orientation, these GPS type skills that some of the different demigods have.
I wonder for them, is it maybe like the wind, like that, because they're like the wind patterns of like
they like
from the
can
south
see that
north.
map of the currents.
Yes, to know like in which current, like where they're currently
that would be really funny.
That would be funny.
So little sidetrack, but it was just, I think it just opened all these different like connections to other media, and also questions about this world too.
Yes. And that was the other thing that this made me think of was that this also kind of applies to all of the like unclaimed children who are unclaimed.
Oh,
and
sure.
like the minor gods of like
Yes.
not having, like, back to your example of How to Train Your Dragon, they have the big dragon book. Like, as of right now, Camp Half-Blood really only has, like, you know, the 12 major gods, and within that only like 8 or 9 of them with a real clear sense of, like, generally speaking, what's the range of what like their kids are able to do. And that leaves out so many other gods, and then what their children would therefore be able to do. And so now I'm just thinking about, you know, after the end of this 5th book, when Percy's like, everyone's welcome, like it becomes like an encyclopedia.
We need a bigger book. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do think where it's relevant in this book, though I don't think it actually happens too often, but could have been interesting, is that Kronos ends up with a lot of unclaimed children, or children who figure out their godly parents who aren't one of the major gods, on his side. And I feel like in my memory, it's not explored that much, but it would have been really interesting to have some of Kronos's moves being partly based on like powers that Camp Half-Blood wouldn't have known about, because these unclaimed kids are the children of gods that aren't like studied as much because they don't have that same presence at camp.
Totally. Yeah. No, I agree. And so coming back to them on the boat, they're kind of being like now tailed by a Coast Guard vessel that's suspicious of a lifeboat traveling at, I think Percy said they're traveling like 100 knots an hour, which as far as I'm aware is incredibly fast.
Yep.
And so this is when Annabeth directs Percy to keep on going into Chesapeake Bay because she knows a place that they can hide. And Percy has a moment of being like, I wonder why, I don't know, but I'm not going to dig, and like, let's just keep on going. And then we get kind of like, not necessarily power unlocked, but like a deeper understanding of Percy's abilities, because when they go from being like in the sea to then cross like and enter the mouth of a river, Percy can feel in his body the change from saltwater to freshwater, and suddenly he's tired and frazzled. And so that there's like that greater understanding of like not all water is equal to the child of Poseidon. Like he can have control over, kind of generally speaking, all water, but what fuels him and what powers him and gives him all these extra abilities to such great extent really is like salt water over fresh water.
It's like the ocean. And we know from the St. Louis Arch that he can breathe underwater and any water and that kind of thing.
And that any water can heal him, like from the first book with the fight with Clarice at Camp Half-Blood.
Exactly,
but there are like the kind of next level abilities feel very tied to
the ocean.
The sea. Yeah. And so Annabeth directs him to a very specific spot, which he's like relieved for because he's now lost all navigational ability.
Right. It's kind of good that she knows.
Yeah, he knew where they were, and then as soon as they were in the river, he was like, I got no clue where we're going.
Yeah,
I'm lost. But she knows precisely where to go, and they like kind of bring the boat in, cover it up to disguise it, and she takes them to an old Half-Blood hideout that she made with Talia and Luke. And there's still supplies there, like there's sleeping bags and blankets, an ice chest, a kerosene lamp, and demigod provisions like bronze javelin tips, a quiver full of arrows, an extra sword, a box of ambrosia. Like, this is a fully equipped place. And it made me, my biggest question was like, how did they get these things prior to arriving at camp? Like,
that's my question too.
Like, were they, like, how are they acquiring ambrosia without the help of a god when they're not at Camp Half-Blood or connected to Camp Half-Blood yet?
Yes, that's my question too, because from what we understand, this is when they were on the run. When they were on the run, predated any of them having arrived at Camp Half-Blood.
Yes.
So, yes, particularly the ambrosia, it gave me that question as well. I also want to note 2 things real quick in this section. One is that they're in this really marshy area, and Percy like really doesn't like that it's different from New York, specifically is what he says.
I know.
I also have to say, like, Chesapeake Bay immediately put, like, Hamilton lyrics in my brain. So the whole time I'm reading this chapter, it's just, like, that part is, like, going through my head. But because we're in this marshy place, I think so I am, like, a Indiana Jones, not snakes kind of person.
Right, yeah.
And we get our first snake here who slithers past Percy's shoe and disappears into the grass. Mm-hmm. It's gonna get worse later. Spoiler alert. Yeah. But I just wanted to note, like, there's a thing about snakes in this chapter.
Yeah. Yes. And I guess to a certain degree that does kind of hint to what is to come, like hint to the demigods of, like,
yes, I think
watch out, some real big ones.
Yeah, I actually think it is like a forewarning. And another piece I just want to say is, like, outside of any of the other, context, I just personally find the hideout that they've made, and the idea they made a bunch of different hideouts, like, very... That speaks to, like, the part of me that liked to read YA books and still likes to read YA books. This, like... The kids made a hideout for themselves. Yeah, like, I loved reading the Boxcar Children growing up. Totally. And so, like, whenever I read this, I'm like, yeah, this is cool. Like, they made a place that's safe for them and where they can be together. So, yeah, I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but I always love a story that includes kids, like, creating their own spaces that are just for them.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I think my peak forever of that is the Mixed Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Weiler.
I was just thinking of that too.
Nothing
where
tops.
The place they made is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
There's just, for me, nothing tops that. Of, like, you make it, like, I wanted to live in a museum.
Totally.
It was like, that is my dream.
Yes.
I can live around all of these things that I'm fascinated by, that I can, like, in the middle of the night,
just go look at the art whenever you want.
Yes.
Go get pennies from the fountain.
Yep.
Buy sandwiches.
My dream.
Yeah, but, like, that and the Boxcar Children, so there's just, like, this just being a little piece of that in here that I think is fun.
Yeah. And I also think, particular to this book, to me, this always felt like this wasn't exclusive to Luke and Talia, but was, like, a tradition of, like, survival for demigods.
Absolutely.
Of, like, we make these hideouts, like, and I wondered, to answer our question, like, I mean, because Annabeth says that Talia, her and Luke made this one, and I can't remember if we get this clarified later on or not, so I might be incorrect about this, but, is there a network that demigods who...
Right.
Like, is there somehow kind of a way for kids to know if they're able to get connected with other demigods and, like, survive together? Because it felt to me like this was almost sort of a tradition that came from somewhere, like a survival. Yeah, because
they said they made a dozen safe houses. It's possible that they found one and that gave them the idea. Like, I don't remember if we get that information either, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is something between Camp Half-Blood and Camp Jupiter that the kids have to get to, if this is something that is common, for demigods to create. And I think what's really interesting here, because there is so much, because Talia is such a presence in this book before she's even back in physical form. Like, she is all over this book, and in this chapter in particular. But I think it's interesting then they get to this place and Annabeth is talking about how the three of them, Luke and Talia and Annabeth, were on the run again. And Percy registers this emotion.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's very brave of him to come to the correct emotional term.
Yes.
Because it's hard. It's hard to acknowledge to yourself when this is true. First, he's like, when Annabeth speaks about this, it makes him feel uncomfortable. And then he whittles down and he's honest with himself and he says, that's not the word. The word was jealous. And I think it's just like in a book where Percy's he's dealing with a lot of really hard emotions and not his best self. This is just a moment that came through as, like, he's being honest with himself, that because of his ties to Annabeth and his resentment of Luke, and the comparisons to Talia probably, which Annabeth is going to do even more in this chapter, that hearing her talk about that experience makes him feel jealous.
Totally. And it also, I think it's like major props as like a 13-year-old to be like, oh, what I'm feeling right now is jealousy. And I think it also feels it feels like an incredibly age appropriate emotional like reaction to have in terms of like when I think about myself and my friends at that time in life, like a friend even having like a secondary friend group simultaneously was like a thing and cause drama to like be a part of two like distinct friend
doing
groups.
Something with a couple people and not a couple other people, or
and so like
absolutely
Annabeth having this whole like friend group past that's incredibly deep and meaningful and impactful and like shaped her as a person, and but then Percy being like, but you, me, and Grover, like, but we're the like, you know, the trio, that it feels very like the developmentally like understandable like reaction to have, because I just can remember like all of the drama that started in middle school around like things like that, things that were just like you had other friends and that made someone mad.
I remember that too. I think that happens a lot in especially middle school. So absolutely. Yeah, no, that's such a big thing. So I think that's a good point. Developmentally,
and Annabeth is like, now she's kind of making it clear she doesn't really want to talk. She's like doing body language, I'm kind of emotionally cutting off from like everyone else here. And this is where we're pulling in all of the references that things in this chapter made us think of. I then immediately was remembering in Shrek when this scene just felt like the scene in Shrek where Shrek sends Donkey off to find these flowers that like don't exist.
And Donkey is colorblind.
Yes, because Shrek just wants to like get rid of Donkey in order to like talk. Be alone. Or I think Fiona. Sorry, no, because Shrek is the one who's injured, so Fiona sends Donkey off to find the flowers to help Shrek. But it just made me think of that in this instance, in the way that Percy asked Tyson to go look for a wilderness convenience store. Just look for powdered donuts or something, but don't go too far. And I'm like, you are in a swamp, my guy.
Yeah.
You're talking about hunting and gathering, not like there is no wilderness convenience store
and
to be found.
Like everything that we say about Percy and Tyson, I just think that using this as a tool, it's like a manipulation tool to assume that Tyson won't be able to read through what he's saying, and to not just be honest and be like, hey, I'd like to talk with Annabeth alone for a little bit. Like, can we just have some space to do that? Like the idea that you can't just ask for what you need, but you have to trick Tyson into it. I just think it goes along with all the things that we've been talking about. But Tyson is like earnestly like ready to take up this challenge and go find donuts. And then that gives Percy the opportunity to talk with Annabeth, and he's like, I'm sorry that we saw Luke, and she says that it's not his fault. And then Percy says, which I'm like, this book in multiple different times, at least they are so much more aware. Like in The Lightning Thief, we're just there like, notice this, notice this, notice this. In this book, we'll be like, notice this, and then the next chapter they notice this.
They notice it. Yes, really good. I know. It's in this book we don't have to eat our own words, but it is a lot more like you very correctly pointed out. Luke is letting them get away too easily, all these things, and they're now about to have a conversation about the fact that Percy's like,
and even like on the ship, they get I have a bad feeling about this. Like they have that moment, so Percy says that Luke let them go too easily, and he's hoping he'd been imagining it, but Annabeth confirms that feeling, and then also notes the piece about the gamble, and they'll take the bait. and thinks that he was talking about them. And then Percy is wondering if the fleece is the bait or if Grover's the bait, which are both two great guesses given the information that they have so far. And then Annabeth is trying to extrapolate what Luke's goal is with all of this, and she's guessing maybe he wants the fleece for himself, maybe he's hoping that he can steal it from them, but they'll do all the hard work to get it. So, you know, she's got the corkboard out and she is trying to make all of the dots line up with her string as best as she can. But what she lands on, which I think makes sense, is I just can't believe he would poison the tree. And at the end of the day, I think that the last chapter was in part so hard for Annabeth, because Luke is basically like, yes, I am the villain of your story, and I used to be the person who took care of you and you could count on. And now I am confirming that I have hurt the spirit of our friend, and I have bad intentions against you. And I just think that's such an emotional blow for Annabeth. But what it leads to is actually a really interesting conversation about Talia.
Yes, and really quick before we get to that, just to add to why it is so hard for Annabeth, I was reflecting on the fact that, like, Annabeth's first found family was Luke and Talia, not Camp Half-Blood. And I think that's also why there are such deep, inseparable bonds, like, between all of them, because they were each other's first found families. After the family situations that the three of them came from, they were each other's first, like, we are now experiencing people having our backs, protecting one another, defending one another. And they all understood
the importance of that because of the family's situations that they came from.
Exactly. And then Camp Half-Blood came into the picture, but the three of them came into each other's lives first. And I think that is why it's so, like, foundational.
Like the betrayal.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to remember. They were the first chosen family and probably the first people they felt safe with because of that. And that is a deep bond.
Yes. Yeah.
That is a deep bond. So it's shaking up her whole worldview. Yeah. That he is betraying her and Talia simultaneously.
Yeah. Because I think if I were to guess on Annabeth's part, I think it feels more like Luke is betraying our family. Like, Talia, I think, is a deeper betrayal than Camp, than, like, putting Camp at risk. It's like, he's ending.
And that's why she said, that's what she emphasizes at the end of her guessing.
Yeah, because also, as far as she's aware, Luke is now killing the last remaining piece of Talia. Like, a piece of her was that tree, and by killing the tree, he is now killing whatever of Talia Annabeth was able, like, all of them were able to have, like, via the tree being a living thing that existed.
That just made me realize that, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Annabeth, like, goes to that tree and talks to her. Like she probably has a relationship with that tree that we just don't see because she's not the main person we're following in these books. So it's like killing your friend all over again.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I think, is really hard to imagine. And so then Percy's curious about one particular thing that Luke said. And I think it's partly because he is really focused on Luke's betrayal in particular and his perception of what's right and wrong. And he asks Annabeth what Luke meant by saying that Talia would have been on his side.
Yeah.
And Annabeth is like, he's wrong, but Percy doesn't think that she sounds sure. And she's been cleaning her knife, so there's kind of a funny moment where he's like, maybe I shouldn't have started this conversation while she's, like, holding a knife.
Well, and just the layer of that Percy at this moment does not know is that is the dagger that Luke gave to her. And so it's like she has been upset. She's seen Luke. She's upset. She's found out, confirmed he's the one who poisoned Talia's tree. And in this moment of her being this old place that she was in with the three of them, and she's really upset, the first thing that she does is get out this dagger that Luke gave to her, and clean it and take care of it. Like, not throw it away, not be angry, not engage with it, but clean it, take care of it. Like, it's just...
Yes, that's such a good point.
There are a lot of layers happening here.
The layers of meaning are deep.
There's a lot of... Yeah.
Yeah, from the setting to the knife to... Yes. Yeah. To then what she says. Yes. Which is... I'll just read it because I think this is worth saying. Mm-hmm. Percy, you know who you remind me of most? Talia. You guys are so much alike, it's scary. Either you would have been best friends or you would have strangled each other. Yeah. And I think, like, Annabeth is the best person to make this comparison in terms of, like, how well she knew Talia and knows Percy. Percy's like, let's go with best friends. Like, he's just like, it would have been fine. And what Annabeth says, in order to then answer his question, I think this is, like, interesting information to get as we eventually end this book and go to the next book to, like, find out if they will be friends or enemies. But what she says is that Talia also got angry with her dad, Zeus, sometimes. And that Percy sometimes gets angry at Poseidon. And what she asks him is, would you turn against Olympus because of that? And Percy says no. And then Annabeth says, okay then. Neither would she. Luke's wrong. And I still think that there's some pieces here that we can wonder is, like, is Annabeth trying to convince herself? Is she trying to tell Percy? Like, this logic makes sense to a certain extent, but, you know, there's some there's some layers here where I think Luke is the person who could kind of get under her skin a little bit, because he also knew Talia before they found Annabeth.
Yes. And I feel like it is the classic jab of, like, a person is past, they are no longer here, and someone using them to be like, they would be ashamed of you, or they would, like, speaking as to, like, what that person would have done who was no longer here to say, yes, I would do this thing, or no, I disagree with you, but it being used as, like, an emotional lance in this, like, joust to, like, land one on the other person. And what I do think is kind of interesting is I think Annabeth and Luke are both trying to convince themselves that their version is true. Yes. Luke, I think, needs to believe that Talia would side with him. Annabeth needs to believe that Talia would side with her. And I think Talia, fascinatingly, exists in, like, this gray in the middle piece where she's not going to be won over by Kronos, but she's not, like, a full faith believer in the gods and in Olympus and in her father.
Like, she's literally gonna take herself out of the equation because not fully just because she doesn't want to pick a side, but I think in part because she is conflicted. And so I think Annabeth and Luke are both partly right and partly wrong. And I think they know that, like you said, they're trying to convince themselves of that. And so it's like a tug of war, like an emotional tug of war between them that in the current moment can't be resolved by the person they're actually talking about.
Yep, yeah. And when Talia kind of makes her speech of, like, why she's choosing this, I think if I remember correctly, she does explain, like, that conflict, that, like, being torn between, and I think her feeling that, like, there's a version of me that is gonna, you know, go with Kronos, and there's a version of me that is gonna go with Zeus, but neither of those feeling, I think, like, 100% of her. It's like she finds the way out from everything, like, becoming a hunter of Artemis. She really, like, finds that, like, other, like, I'm
the
like
third option.
The third option, for whatever, I'm visually picturing, like, you know, in Star Wars when, like, Luke is falling and, like, after fighting with Darth Vader, and he's, like, in the city of the clouds, and he's, like, falling, and then a little chute goes whoop, and, like, opens. It's like Talia's, like, doing that. She's falling, and it's like, whoop, here's a little thing, you can go, you go through that, and then you'll be able to fly away. And, like, you won't have to deal with any of this, because the hunters kind of exist outside of all of the political, like, chaos and drama and all of that of the gods.
And most importantly, she cannot be the child of the prophecy. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the mechanic that she's using to get out is to become immortal before she can
never turn 16. She's never turned 16.
And it's like, the two ways to not turn 16 are to die, and she's already done that, and probably doesn't want to repeat it on purpose, or to become immortal, and there's few ways to do that, and this is one of them that's open to her. And so we're talking about the prophecy right now, and that's actually then where Percy's brain goes to, where he wants to ask about the prophecy Luke had mentioned that had to do with his 16th birthday, but Chiron had made it clear that he's not going to hear it until the gods say so, and so he does not ask her about it, but then he does ask about Cyclopes finally, because Luke mentions this to Annabeth, and Annabeth gives us a teaser, essentially, like a little snippet, and she says that he was talking about the real reason Talia died, and then says you can never trust a Cyclops, and then starts to talk about 6 years ago on the night when Grover was leading them to Half-Blood Hill, but is interrupted by a Cyclops, Tyson, who comes in and is proudly holding a box of powdered donuts, because Tyson can do anything, apparently. And Annabeth is like, where did you get that? We're in the middle of the wilderness. And Tyson introduces us to the Monster Donut Shop, and we get our second mini jump, where the next scene actually starts within this chapter, with them crouching behind a tree, staring at a donut shop in the middle of the woods.
And I have some mechanics questions about Monster Donut.
Sure.
So, is it that Percy said, go find some powdered donuts, that then it went, ooh, boom, perfect.
Right.
Like, does like a demigod need to desire powdered donuts? And just every time someone's like, oh, let's go like I want to understand the mechanics of like did this exist
already?
Well,
and then when Percy cuts off a Hydra head later, Annabeth says, oh no, you just created a new franchise. And they're explaining this as like more of like a monster franchise situation. I don't think we have a clear answer in the chapter text on whether it happened to already exist, and there are, we know, demigod hideouts in this area, so it's very possible that like this has just come up because demigods plus monsters equals monster donuts. Or if somehow Percy saying it, like if he had said a different food, like go find us sandwiches in the woods, would it have been like a monster sandwich chain? Or did it just like happen to be a coincidence that he said donuts? Because, and then there ends up being I do think there's a mechanics question that's not fully answered in the chapter.
And like, because Annabeth says that she kind of has this explanation, because Percy's like, Percy's back to Lightning Thief Percy.
Yeah, he really
where
is.
He's frustratingly like not questioning things that are out of place.
Should be, yes.
And it's like, my man, you're in the middle of nowhere.
There's nothing else here.
There is no reason for this donut shop to exist here. You are a demigod. 2 + 2 equals 4.
He even specifically says, it's a chain. We have them in New York. And like, he's seen Monster Donut as a chain before. So he's like, but again, location. Why would it be here with nothing else around it in the middle of the forest?
And we do get Annabeth's explanation of that, she's like, how do you think franchise stores pop up so fast? She says that some of them multiply so fast because all their locations are magically linked to the life force of a monster. So that then made me wonder, like, are hydras tied to monster donuts, or like are specific types, or is it just that a hydra, it needs to be a hydra, but they can be tied to any chain, and the whole like multiple heads thing is why it's like they're tied to the life force?
I do think it might be Hydra specific, because she says some children of Hermes figured out how to do it back in the 1950s, and then she says they breed, and then gets cut off by, perceiving the Hydras there. So I think she's about to say they breed Hydras, and the reason I think that is just because of the way that Hydras function. That,
it makes sense.
You cut one off and it grows more, and so like what's really interesting to me is that she's not saying the monsters created this. She's saying I just, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I hadn't read this in a minute to like remember the mechanics of it, that children of Hermes figured it out and they used a monster. And I feel like that happens a lot sometimes with like,
well, that wasn't clear to me though.
Something bad for a different purpose, and then it kind of like creates other problems.
But that wasn't clear to me. I was unclear as to whether or not the children of Hermes figured out that this was how franchises pop up and that they could then breed hydras to do this themselves, or
the way I read it is that the children of Hermes figured out how to do it back in the 1950s, and then it got out of hand with the monsters creating it from there.
That's it. The wording of it feels unclear to me as to which is correct. Like the chicken or the egg of which came first.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
And the Hermes kids realized it exists and they took advantage of it, or like...
Yeah, I kind of read it as like they created it and then it got out of hand really quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's a hydra.
And then the other mechanics question that I had about this whole scene of Tyson going to the donuts, buying the donuts, coming back, whatnot. Tyson can smell monsters.
Yes.
Wouldn't he smell?
Yeah. I think that's a good question too.
Wouldn't he come back and be like, I found donuts, but there's a bad smell?
Yeah. I've got two things. One is we were just talking about what makes a monster and what monsters smell like and stuff, and the fact that Tyson can like go in here means he is being identified as one of them in some way, at least by them. But he does, the only thing I can think that kind of like makes this make sense is that when they first enter the swampy area, he says, this is a bad place. And when he says that, it made me wonder if he was smelling monsters, right?
That is a really good point. Thank you for that reminder.
That's the one thing I'm thinking where like maybe the whole swamp area smells like monsters. There's a hydra, there's a monster donuts, and there's this hideout for like the hydra ends up like getting into their bags and stuff.
Yep.
And so it just makes me think that maybe it's one of those like we're underground with Grover situations where everything smells like monsters, so he doesn't think the donut shop particularly smells bad.
Yeah. Okay, no, that is a really great point. I completely forgot that Tyson said out loud that note of like it's not a good place. And then that I think answers the question that I just posed of did the monster donut shop already exist or not? And I think it therefore probably did, because I think Tyson, they've rolled up and now Tyson is like, smell
bad.
And then I do think for our many kind of discussions around Tyson and how he's treated, the no follow-up questions to this is a bad place is like, hey, maybe ask some follow-up questions.
What do you mean by that? Like, do you just mean that it's...
Right.
Because Percy just thought to himself essentially that, but it's because it was, like, humid and sticky and, like, not fun.
And not Manhattan.
Not New York. Exactly. Not Manhattan.
Yeah. So, they now, like, Annabeth, in the instant that she has remembered the Hermes children and the hydras, realizes there's a hydra in these woods. And
it's right behind us.
It's right behind them.
Yeah.
Yes. And
it's like that moment where you're like, it's behind us, isn't it? It's a hydra, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And so we get a sense of its scale. Percy at first hears a scraping noise, like something really large, and then he sees a rhino-sized thing moving through the shadows of the trees. And then we get the full picture that it has at least 7 heads, each topped with a hissing reptilian, and its skin is leathery, which is a very common, like so many monsters have leathery skin. That's
every single monster in these books has leathery skin,
and it's under each neck has its own little plastic bib that reads "I'm a monster donut kid."
Which is funny and silly, and
that is funny and silly. And also, I think if there are any like Percy Jackson fans out there who are parents, like that would be a really cute thing to have for your little baby to have a little bib.
This is very much monster donuts for a subscription box item. Would be so fun whenever we get to doing that. But this is where I again go, why did it have to be snakes?
Yes. And the other thing for the parallels back to the first book, this immediately made me think of Medusa and how, like, in both, their first in the middle of nowhere encounter at a food place is like a reptilian based enemy. Like snakes, like lots
with, like,
of multiples of snakes being prominently featured as heads or in the head region, like, and the snakes having a particular ability, like with Medusa they turn you to stone, these they spray acid, like just the kind of parallels of like
deadly abilities.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of funny and interesting.
Totally.
And then the fight with the Hydra ensues, because the Hydra at first doesn't notice them, but Tyson takes, like, it's the classic movie thing. He takes like a step back, he snaps a twig and the Hydra's like locked in on them. Because the other thing I'll make note of before the fight is Percy catches that it has like a yellow duffel. And so he realizes the Hydra has been to their camp and is in all likelihood tracking their scent. Which is why it's so close.
And in terms of the description of this terrifying multi-headed snake situation, each head is diamond-shaped like a rattlesnake's, and it sprays acid, but the mouth is also lined with jagged rows of shark-like teeth. So basically, all bad, all scary. Get me out of here.
Yeah. And, like, they are outmatched in this fight in the Hydra. Like, the fight that ensues is literally just them running for their lives.
Kind of like the bulls again, except in this case... Well, actually, it is like the bulls again, because even Tyson's the one who's able to hold it off. It is like the bulls again.
But, like worse, because there's no... like.
Oh, yeah, no one else is helping them at first.
Well, but then Clarice comes in at
the end. That's what I'm saying.
No, you're so right. It is like the bulls all over again. You were so right. Yes. Yeah, because like...
But not yet. First we're struggling.
First we're struggling. Annabeth tells everyone to scatter. They do, basically because the Hydra heads can like arc their green acid and they're disintegrating tree trunks. So it's no joke what they can do. And Tyson is petrified by the Hydra.
Yeah.
So Tyson is actually like, he's not necessarily in full like force in this fight. A tree is like toppling towards him.
Yeah, which I can't remember if we learned, but the feeling of this gave me like he's faced a Hydra before on the streets kind of feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And because Tyson is not moving as this tree is about to fall onto him, and Percy's actually the one who has to like shove Tyson out of the way in this moment. But then they like move and scatter again, and Percy like gets out his sword to fight, and Annabeth is like, no, don't do it. But she's too late. And he slices off a head, and he realizes in that instant the mistake that he made, because the neck is now split into two, and he's now looking at an 8-headed Hydra. A 7-headed Hydra became an 8-headed Hydra.
Do you know how many, is their baseline, like, are they born with 3 or 2 or 1? Like, do you know what the baseline is?
I don't know.
I just realized we should look that up. I don't know what the baseline is, but it would then tell you how many times a head has been cut off.
Right.
That you get to 8. You know, that it had been at 7. Because I don't think it's born with 7, you know?
But then another question is, because there are like multiple Hydras, in defeating one, goes back to Tartarus and reform. Does it reform with the heads that
That's a good question.
was defeated with? Or does it reform as whatever the like
That's a great
starter
question.
pack Hydra head number?
And then I love that. And then the other thing, Nico could tell us. This has to be in Myth of Magic. But
for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, that's another great question. We have a lot of Hydra-based questions in this chapter.
We need a Hydra expert
one
on
more
the pod.
question is, so if cutting off a head opens a new franchise, does destroying the entire monster
destroy the
close all the
franchises?
franchises? Because also like because, you know, the sort of like funny meta commentary here is like what he does a lot, which is like, this is why franchises open up so quickly.
Yeah.
So, but like franchises also close a lot. And so it'd be like funny if the explanation for why they like go out of business so frequently is also because like they got destroyed by a demigod. You know?
Yeah, no, totally. And then I also wonder, like, in all of these many franchises, because they exist, like Percy Knows Monster Donut from New York City, are they employing humans, like regular mortal humans,
right?
In these businesses?
Because it's described to us that there is someone at the counter, but since we don't go in, I don't know if that's. I'm inclined to think monsters work at Monster Donut.
Same.
But I don't know the answer to that either.
Yeah. And so after Percy cuts off the head, quickly learns his lesson that was the wrong move, Annabeth says they need fire. That's what they need to defeat it. And then this is when Percy remembers the story of, and I always find it funny because Heracles is the Greek version of his name. Yes, I know.
I was going to note that because in this very book, he's talked about Hercules, which is not the Greek way to, like, when he's talking with Hermes and he's talking about his favorite constellation, he says Hercules. But here, when he's I think you're checking.
I'm double checking.
But here, when he talks about the myth of the Hydra, he talks about Heracles, which is the original Greek name that we oftentimes now know as Hercules, or at least I think like Disney
okay, so
movie
in
such.
his dialogue, because there's a distinction here between spoken dialogue and like internal, you know, non-spoken, whatever the name is. God, I should know this.
Internal,
whatever the name is for like internal thoughts, descriptions.
Internal dialogue. You can call it internal dialogue.
So when he says it out loud to Hermes, he says Hercules. But I'm checking on the next page if we ever get that. That's the one time that name is referenced, and it's Percy saying it out loud as Hercules. So it is really interesting that, like, out loud he said Hercules, but then here, like, in his mind, that's what Heracles would have done. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting because it's in the same book.
I know. The other thing that I found interesting, and it made me want to talk to, like, someone who's an expert at kind of like how the Greek and Roman mythologies have lived on. I was just I have always found it fascinating that the most common name for the gods that people reference in like popular culture now is the Greek version, but then Hercules, the Roman version, is the name that is known. Like, it's told as a Greek myth story, but we use the Roman name, not the Greek name.
I think to add a layer of that we can ask whoever we can ask about this is, it does seem like official use, even though maybe in the collective consciousness, the Greek names, like Zeus, for example, has lasted longer. What I've always thought was interesting is that anytime it's more official, like for example, planets that are named for gods are
it's
Roman.
The Roman. Mm-hmm.
So you know. What is causing that to influence in different directions? Because both have lived on just in different ways.
Yes. No, I know. I agree.
So many questions.
so many questions.
Okay, but we're still fighting a Hydra that's spitting acid. So
yes,
our heroes are in trouble.
And they're in deep trouble. They're just kind of trying to survive, and Tyson does have a moment where he kind of steps in and is like, you know, in the ring, in the boxing ring.
Well, he says, no hitting my friends, which I think is just another example of like how Tyson thinks about Percy and Annabeth differently than they think about him. And he starts smashing the monster's head with his fist so fast it reminds Percy of whack-a-mole. But it's just sort of like a stalling tactic. Like, he's not going to be able to defeat this Hydra using his like pure strength. Yeah.
And they're in this like wet, marshy, humid place. Yeah. So fire is not going to be an easy thing to start, even if they had the means to do it. And Percy has this moment of realizing that like they're in a state right now where all they're doing is just postponing their death, that eventually one of them is going to make a mistake and this Hydra is going to get them because they just do not have a way out of this until he hears a very strange sound that Tyson immediately identifies. Percy and Annabeth don't know what it is. Tyson immediately identifies as a steam engine, very specifically.
Here's a question. So Percy can identify like different kinds of boats and stuff.
Yeah.
But do you think that Tyson lives at the intersection of like Poseidon knowledge and Hephaestus knowledge? That
I think so.
He can identify this because he understands machines?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too.
And
kind of fun.
Oh, it's so fun. And Percy hears a familiar voice. But he's kind of like hoping it's not who he thinks it is.
Even though it's gonna save him.
I know. And he hears the familiar voice of a girl talk with a gravelly voice of a man, and the final instruction that this girl gives is fire at will, Captain. And Annabeth is like, hit. It's funny, she says hit the dirt.
Yeah,
like,
instead of hit the deck because they're on land.
She's just basically get down now because she knows. She knows what's coming. Yep. And there's an earth-shattering boom, a flash of light, a column of smoke, and then the Hydra explodes right in front of them, showering them with nasty green slime that vaporized as soon as it hit, the way monster guts tend to do. So I guess there is a kind of like, they're not then left drenched in like the green slime, which I guess is nice because it goes away. But Annabeth is like, oh, gross. Understandably. Yes.
And then Tyson's just delighted again, as always. That's his main mode. But he's like, steamship. Like he's like a new type of ship we get to see. But I do think that, you know, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Clarice at the end here. But one thing in that argument that she has with the gravelly voice is that the man is trying to say that the heroes are too close to the Hydra. And she says, damn the heroes, fire at will, Captain. And I think that this is such a perfect example here of like Clarice being a complicated hero / like frenemy for our group here, because she's like saving their lives but also not too concerned about what might happen to them with this action. And that's just so, you know, kind of her in where she's in at her position. But as I said at the beginning, this is us like finally rejoining the main plot of the book. Yes.
It also feels like the exact calculation that the child of a war god would make in this moment.
Yes.
You know, is like the greater existential threat is the Hydra, and like basically like that is priority number one, and the risk posed to the three heroes is like, well, priority number one, taking down
Hydra. I do think she's also like annoyed at them, and and she kind of like in her dialogue at the end makes that clear. So she is also annoyed at them, and also I think that she, from the war god perspective, would be like, if you have the ability to survive in this moment, then you deserve to survive, and if you don't, then you don't.
Yeah. And so yes, we then get the fuller picture of this ship that she is on, which Percy describes as the strangest one he's ever seen. It rides low in the water like a submarine. The deck is plated with iron. In the middle, there's a trapezoid-shaped casemate with slats on each side for cannons. And the flag that is the familiar flag of the Ares cabin waves at the top of the ship, which is a wild boar and spear on a blood-red field. And lining the deck are zombies in gray uniforms. Percy very correctly identifies, I guess he remembers his history classes, that this ship is an ironclad Civil War battle cruiser, which is the actual, like, these are the ships that were used.
Yes. And he recognizes that the shimmering faces of the dead soldiers remind him of those that he'd seen in the underworld guarding Hades' palace. And this is something we've identified and talked about, and like we'll continue to track, is some of these like parallels but also distinctions between Hades and Ares powers.
And I did do a quick Google search to see if Rick Riordan came up with the name of the ship or if this was an actual ship.
What did you find?
He came up with it. It is not a real ship.
Interesting.
Yes,
okay.
the CSS Birmingham.
That's kind of interesting.
Is his own. The name is his own invention. But yes, then ending this chapter, we see Clarice wearing full Greek battle armor, standing next to the smoking cannon, and she says, "Losers, but I suppose I have to rescue you. Come aboard." Yeah. And that's the end of the chapter.
Yeah. And like I said, this line of dialogue is so perfectly Clarice in that sort of complexity and tension we talk about between her being a bully, like being a hurt person who hurts people, being,
opening line, calling them losers.
Exactly.
Unnecessary.
And at the same time being like, I guess I have to rescue you, like, come aboard. She's not just leaving them there. Yeah. And she just has saved their lives again. And then also her being in full battle armor, like she does get to show off, as we've discussed, like her leadership and battle abilities in this book. And we're seeing, the questing leader Clarice, like get up that she's got. And it feels like it would strike a very impressive figure or picture with all of these like undead soldiers around her, and she's in the full armor and imagining it like glinting in the sunlight, and and it's interesting because we just boarded and disembarked a ship, a vessel of transportation, and it was a very mixed bag of things and mostly negative. And so I do think it's not quite as ominous to board this ship as the last one, but it doesn't feel great. Like, I don't think anyone's excited.
It, like, Andromeda was, like, life-threatening, scary. I don't, from my recollection of the next chapter, I don't think that we dive into the complicated nature of boarding a ship full of Confederate soldiers. But that's a whole other, like, that's neither ship. I don't want to be on either. I'm good.
Absolutely not. And I do think it's interesting, and maybe we'll talk about this more next chapter, that, like, Andromeda has a ship full of, they're not zombies, they're not dead or undead, but they are under some kind of trance that's making them not feel fully alive either. And then from what we can tell, most of the beings on this ship are zombies or undead. And so there are still some, like, really interesting parallels, but I do think that I'm not going into the next chapter feeling like this was a victory for our team.
No.
If we're on Team Percy Annabeth Tyson, this is not feeling like a victory. No. And it's still feeling ominous, even though it's not like we're going to go confront Luke or, having... Yeah. I think the symbolism, I think maybe what you're speaking to is, like, there's problematic and scary symbolism about each ship or each sea vessel.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the last thing that I'll just say that this ending made me think about in our kind of like description of where Clarice is now. She's in this, like, she's still a bully, but she's helping them. Like, it made me, I was thinking about like family dynamics and how, like, I know people who had like a cousin who bullied them like crazy growing up, and like their cousin was like their biggest bully in life, and then like they grew into adulthood and maybe the relationship got repaired, maybe it didn't, or maybe it sits in a different place, but just that I really think that like there's a very interesting like family dynamics map, not just with the Olympian gods, but with all the kids at Camp Half-Blood, and like mapping out those relationships, I think is really interesting, and how they change and evolve and grow over time. But that, like, because I think that where she's like, she's bullying them and she is also helping them, and there's something about that my brain went like to family.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I feel like the way the real only place where that exists and people like tolerate it is familial relationships.
I think that's a really good point. And even thinking about like Clarice's dad being at the root of so much of her own pain and bullying behavior. Like, that feels like a big piece in the intergenerational stuff we've talked about. Yep. So I do think that's a really good point and something that we can kind of hold as context when we're going into the next chapter. But any other final thoughts from you?
I don't think so. Any last thoughts from you?
I head empty. All thoughts have been expended from my mind.
The only thought that I'll say before you're about to read the next chapter title is, I think next episode I'm going to make a case that these chapter titles should have been swapped.
Yeah, I think we both will make a case for that. So let us know what you think next week when we read Sea of Monsters, Chapter 11, Clarice Blows Up Everything. Bye.
Bye.